story, here's a line based on the scenario. The Unseen Hand. In a small town in the heart of America, a case is unfolding that will challenge the very foundations of the justice system. A group of white police officers is accused of excessive force during an arrest that turned deadly. The officers are confident in their innocence, and the local judge, known for his pro law enforcement stance, has already signaled his bias toward dismissing the case. The courtroom feels tense, with the community divided along racial lines, tensions escalating as the trial progresses. Main characters: Detective Michael Hartley, a seasoned white officer who has served in the force for over 2 decades. He's convinced that his actions, although controversial, were justified. A younger, ambitious white cop who is part of the case. She looks up to Hartley and believes in her duty to uphold the law, even if it means ignoring the nuances of the situation. Ava Matthews, a brilliant and composed U.S. attorney who has been assigned to prosecute the case. She is an African American woman in her late 30s, known for her unyielding pursuit of justice. Ava, however, has a history that makes her reluctant to take this case. She has witnessed firsthand the impact of systemic racism in the justice system. A conservative judge with a reputation for siding with law enforcement officers in high-profile cases. He believes in the idea of protecting the protectors, but this case threatens to test his convictions. Plot outline. The case begins with the prosecution's opening statements, where Ava Matthews lays out a compelling argument about the wrongful death of a young black man, Elijah James. Witnesses testify about the brutality used during his arrest, while footage from bystanders shows the officer's aggression. The evidence seems stacked against the police officers, but despite this, Judge Lawson remains skeptical of the prosecution's case. Ava Matthews, knowing that she must stay focused and not let the emotional weight of the case cloud her judgment, continues her argument. Led by a high-powered lawyer, argues that the officers acted in self-defense, pointing out Elijah's alleged criminal history and painting the officers as victims in a dangerous situation. But as the trial progresses, Ava begins to notice the subtle but undeniable signs of bias, particularly from the judge, who frequently rules in favor of the defense, dismissing key pieces of evidence that might shift the case. The community's frustration grows as it becomes clear that justice is being obstructed, and tensions between local residents and law enforcement begin to rise. In a pivotal moment, as the trial reaches its climax, Ava makes an unexpected move. Just as Judge Lawson seems ready to rule in favor of the defense and dismiss the case, Ava calmly reveals her identity to the court, declaring that she is a U.S. attorney, and the case is far from over. The revelation shakes the courtroom. Judge Lawson, stunned by the power and authority of Ava's position, suddenly realizes that this case holds far-reaching implications beyond the local jurisdiction. With the pressure mounting from higher courts and the federal government, Judge Lawson is forced to reconsider his stance. The revelation of Ava's true authority gives her the leverage needed to expose the deep-seated bias within the local legal system and ensures that the case is transferred to a federal court for a more impartial review. In the final twist, as the federal case progresses, Ava is able to uncover a pattern of corruption and racial discrimination that stretches far beyond this one incident, leading to a wave of investigations into police conduct, legal practices, and the broader justice system. Themes: justice versus bias. The story examines how the law is often influenced by personal beliefs and systemic prejudice, especially when it comes to race. Courage and tenacity. Ava Matthews embodies the quiet strength and determination of someone who is willing to challenge the system, even when it seems stacked against her. Accountability. The story highlights the importance of holding individuals and institutions accountable, particularly those with power and authority. This could make for a powerful story that explores the dynamics of consequences continue to reverberate throughout the town and beyond. The conviction of the officers sends shockwaves through the local community, igniting mixed emotions. Some people feel vindicated, believing that justice has been served. Others, however, are outraged, feeling that the convictions were the result of outside influence and that their officers, who they view as heroes, were unfairly targeted. The town, once divided by class and race, now faces an even greater rift. Protests continue for weeks, though some shift from anger to demands for systemic change. Citizens from all walks of life are rallying behind the idea of police reform. Ava Matthews, though no longer actively involved in the case, is frequently called to speak at forums and rallies across the country, pushing for comprehensive change and an overhaul of police practices. But the road ahead isn't easy. The emotional scars from Elijah James's death are still fresh, and many individuals are struggling to process what happened. As Ava returns to her role as a U.S. attorney, she begins to realize that her battle for justice is not just about one case, it's part of a much larger movement. Ava's struggle for balance. While Ava is celebrated for her role in the trial's outcome, she faces a personal battle of her own. The weight of the case, combined with the constant media attention, has taken its toll on her mental and emotional health. She is overwhelmed by the realization that the fight for justice is ongoing and that no single victory can undo the years of injustice that preceded it. Her relationship with her family becomes strained, as her long hours and dedication to the cause mean less time spent with her loved ones. Ava's mother, who raised her to stand up for what is right, expresses concern for her daughter's well-being, warning her that the fight for justice should not consume her. Yet, Ava knows that the battle is far from over. She channels her grief and stress into her work, pushing for policy changes and lobbying for better training and oversight for police forces across the nation. Detective Hartley's redemption arc. Detective Michael Hartley, now facing the consequences of his actions, struggles to find his place in the world. He is stripped of his badge and placed on administrative leave while awaiting sentencing. His reputation as a police officer is shattered, and his internal guilt weighs heavily on him. He spends many sleepless nights reflecting on the decisions that led to Elijah James's death, realizing how blind he was to the systemic racism and corruption within the force. Yet, there is a glimmer of hope for redemption. Hartley begins seeking counseling, acknowledging his role in perpetuating injustice. He starts to engage in the very conversations he once avoided, those about privilege, bias, and the need for police reform. He reaches out to Ava, not to apologize for the trial's outcome, but to ask for guidance on how he can make a meaningful difference in his community. Ava, though skeptical at first, recognizes that true change begins with personal reflection. She agrees to mentor him, understanding that even the most reluctant participants in the system can contribute to its transformation. A community in flux. The town itself begins to grapple with its own transformation. The police department, no longer shielded from scrutiny, faces pressure from both the public and the federal government to reform its practices. New leadership is brought in to replace the old guard, and officers are required to undergo extensive sensitivity training and participate in community dialogues about race and justice. While the changes are slow and often met with resistance, there is an undeniable shift. Residents, particularly from the Black community, begin to feel a renewed sense of empowerment. They participate in town hall meetings, engaging with the newly formed Police Oversight Board. The dialogue between law enforcement and the community is tense at times, but the willingness to engage is a significant step forward. The future of police reform. In the weeks that follow, Ava Matthews is approached by other cities and states interested in replicating the reforms initiated in her town. The case becomes a symbol of hope for those who have fought against systemic injustice for generations. As a respected voice in the national conversation about police reform, Ava continues to advocate for changes at every level, local, state, and federal. Ava pushes for the establishment of a nationwide police reform initiative, calling for change. As time moves forward, the ripple effect of the trial and its aftermath continues to resonate in unexpected ways. Ava Matthews' influence, though significant in the legal and political spheres, also has a personal impact that ripples through the lives of those directly involved, both the victims and the perpetrators. As Ava balances the national spotlight with her desire for genuine change, she comes to realize that the true measure of success lies not in the headlines, but in the quiet transformation that occurs on a community level. Ava's reflections, the power of the personal. Ava Matthews, now in her early 40s, is still grappling with the balance between her public role as a U.S. attorney and her personal life. The victories and setbacks she faces in her work often weigh heavily on her heart. She has built a career around the belief that justice can be achieved. But as she contemplates the personal cost of this journey, she realizes that true change often begins with individuals. Despite the growing reforms at the national level, Ava has faced setbacks. There are always forces resistant to change, even when it's for the greater good. But with each victory, however small, she feels a deep sense of accomplishment. Her legacy, she believes, will not solely be defined by the high profile cases, but by the quiet conversations between officers and citizens, the changes that happen in the hearts and minds of those who were once part of a flawed system. Her work now revolves around community outreach, teaching police officers to listen, to understand the communities they serve. She partners with former police officers who have undergone their own transformations, individuals who now speak to other officers about their past mistakes, the dangers of blind loyalty, and the human cost of failing to see things from another person's perspective. Ava's own healing comes slowly. She has learned to and personal life. Her mother, now elderly, still reminds her that justice, while necessary, should not come at the cost of one's own peace of mind. Though Ava struggles with this, she has come to accept that finding peace is as important as finding justice. Detective Hartley's redemption, from silence to action. For Detective Hartley, life after the trial is a long journey toward redemption. His public disgrace is only the first step. He must now rebuild his life and reputation. Initially, Hartley struggles to find employment in law enforcement, his name synonymous with scandal. Yet, as he faces the consequences of his actions, Hartley's journey of personal growth begins to take shape. Hartley reaches out to Ava Matthews, not just to apologize, but to ask for help in making amends for his past. With Ava's support, he starts a community program aimed at building trust between law enforcement and marginalized groups. He mentors young officers, teaching them about the importance of cultural sensitivity and accountability, sharing the lessons he learned the hard way. But even as he works to make right his past wrongs, Hartley faces the same skepticism he once displayed. Many in the community view him as a traitor to his own kind, a man who betrayed the badge. But slowly, through consistent actions and genuine efforts, he earns the trust of those who were once hostile toward him. Hartley's greatest challenge is confronting his own guilt. Every day, he works to atone for the life of Elijah James, the young man whose death was the catalyst for this entire journey. It is a slow process, one that involves listening, learning, and living with the pain of his past mistakes. But in the end, Hartley finds solace in knowing that he is not the man he once was, and that is enough to drive him forward. The community's struggle and triumph. The town, though scarred, begins to heal. The memorial for Elijah James becomes a place of gathering, not just for those who mourn his death, but for those who wish to support the ongoing fight for justice and equality. The town's citizens, long divided by race and class, find common ground in their desire for change. The police department, under new leadership, undergoes a complete transformation. Officers now undergo continuous training on de-escalation, racial profiling, and mental health awareness. The department adopts a transparent policy regarding use of force incidents and begins to rebuild its relationship with the community through regular meetings and events where citizens can voice their concerns directly to the police. The town's shift is not immediate, nor is it easy. There are protests, heated debates, and moments when it feels as though things may regress. But the presence of community leaders, many of whom were once skeptical of change, guides the town through these difficult moments. These leaders include both citizens and law enforcement officers who have committed themselves to the work of bridging the divide between the two sides. For many, Elijah James' death has become a symbol of both the cost of injustice and the potential for transformation. His name lives on in the programs, the dialogues, and the shifts in perspective that follow. What began as a tragedy has over time become a rallying point for reform in a town that refuses to remain stagnant. Ava's legacy, building the future. Years pass, and Ava Matthews sees her dream for a fairer justice system becoming a reality, piece by piece. She has successfully lobbied for national police reforms, including the creation of national standards for officer training and the implementation of federal oversight in departments with a history of misconduct. Ava's influence stretches beyond the courtroom and into the political arena. She is invited to testify before Congress on the importance of further reforms, and her insights begin to shape policies that promote better community policing and the reduction of racial disparities within the justice system. But while the work continues, Ava remains grounded in the belief that justice is not just about changing laws, it's about changing hearts and minds. She continues to mentor young lawyers, teaching them that the law is just one tool in the fight for a more just society. She emphasizes that lasting change requires people to believe in each other and in the possibility of redemption. In the final scenes of the story, Ava stands at the memorial for Elijah James, surrounded by community members, including former law enforcement officers who now work alongside her in promoting change. As she looks at the faces of the people she has helped guide, she knows that while her work is far from finished, the world is slowly becoming a better place. One case, one conversation, and one life at a time. Themes to conclude: the ongoing fight for justice. This emphasizes that even after a victory, the work to achieve a more just world is unending and requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and effort. Redemption is a journey. Both Hartley and Ava's stories highlight that redemption, whether personal or societal, is a long, challenging process that involves consistent, meaningful actions and deep reflection. Transformation through unity. The town's healing process underscores that meaningful change often requires collective action, working together across divides to create a better future.